Hey there, I'm James of Pistils Pollen. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here because today we're going to talk about actually a really fun plant, the Dracaena plants. Now, these Dracaenas are super cool. I love them because they've got really lush tropical vibes, but they come in a very low maintenance care profile, right? So these plants are pretty easy to source and find. You can find them even in most big box stores for a relatively affordable price. You can find them on my online plant shop as well for affordable prices, and they're pretty strong and low maintenance and easy to care for, and they're adaptable. They grow in a wide variety of circumstances, whether that's inside your home or your office or outside on your balcony during the summer season. So I'm excited to dive in and talk about Dracaena plants. Let's begin by talking a little bit about the natural history of these Dracaena plants. Where do Dracaena plants come from? Now, they come from places like really all around the world. Think Africa, even North Australia, think places like South Asia and Southeast Asia. So they're really adapted to a wide range of environments in their natural habitat across multiple different continents. And their genus includes lots of different species of plants that you might not associate with the grouping of plants that I have here. And that includes plants like the lucky bamboo, for example, which is not actually or technically a bamboo plant in the way that a lot of other bamboo plants are. It's actually a species of Dracaena. That also includes the recently reclassified Sansevieria plants. Think those snake plants or mother-in-law's tongues. Believe it or not, a lot of scientists now will classify those into the same genus as these plants, Dracaena. Now, in today's video, we're not going to talk about lucky bamboo and we're not going to talk about snake plants. For the purposes of this video, we're going to talk about those plants that historically and classically are considered or called Dracaena at your local plant shop or your local plant nursery. And that's the plants that you see here. And they've got these lovely, like sort of tropical vibes. They don't have those snake-like spears of a snake plant. They don't have that sort of bamboo-esque structure of lucky bamboo. Instead, they bring these other gorgeous tropical vibes. And they have a very similar set of care characteristics that I think are a little bit different from plants like lucky bamboo or snake plants. So we're just going to talk about these sorts of plants because they have very similar care systems and care structures and care needs. And let's talk about those. Light requirements. What are the light requirements of these Dracaena? Now, unlike snake plants, and we're going to talk about snake plants in their own sort of dedicated video later on. So this is going to be the last time I'm going to try to make a comparison and contrast statement about snake plants and Dracaena plants. But Dracaena plants are actually shockingly low light tolerant. They can do very well for extended periods of time in low light conditions. And actually, I would say that they like to thrive in sort of a medium to bright light system. So if you have that, if you've got a nice east-facing window and you really want your Dracaena to have its best shot at growing lush in full foliage and nice colorations or variations and patterns on its leaves, then I would definitely recommend growing these in a medium light situation. Having said that though, they are known for being an office park plant in part because they just really do well under things like artificial lights that you would see in an office or in a shopping center mall, right? They really just don't need that bright light in order to survive. But if you want them to thrive, just give them a little bit more and they'll probably be happy. One other thing I will say about these plants, if you have a low light patio or balcony situation. Let's say you live in the city and you have a large tree canopy on your street so you don't get a lot of natural light, plus you maybe have a balcony that's covered by your neighbors above you. These Dracaena plants are an excellent way to bring a plant to your outdoor patio for the summer season. Maybe you could do that with a fern, but they're a little bit less fussy and finicky with a fern, and they're actually pretty affordable and pretty easy to find in a really large and substantial size, something that I think is a little bit nicer in an outdoor patio where you have that space for the summer season that you might not have perhaps in your living room environment. Watering your Dracaena. Let's talk about watering your Dracaena. Now, this is actually one of the areas where if you're going to mess up in caring for your Dracaena plants, it's probably going to be with regard to the watering situation. These plants love to dry out a little bit in between your waterings. They're very hardy and robust when it comes to drought conditions and low light conditions. So especially if you have these plants growing in a low light condition situation, you're going to really want to make sure you're controlled with your watering, because if they sit in a wet or heavy soil for far too long, they're likely going to develop a condition called root rot, where those roots literally start to rot inside the soil because they're just wet for far too long. So be a little bit light-handed when it comes with your watering with these plants. If you're like either over or underwater, definitely underwater on these plants, and they are probably going to do much better with underwatering than overwatering. That brings us to soil conditions. What kind of soil mixes can you use to give these plants the best shot at surviving and thriving under your care? I would say, actually, I might use my succulent soil mix recipe when crafting a custom soil blend for your Dracaena plants. And this is related to that watering situation I was telling you about. These plants can tolerate drought-like conditions far better than they can tolerate overly moist conditions. And so they might do okay in a typical houseplant mix for quite some time. They might do okay in my tropical or aroid soil mix recipe as well. But if you want the most foolproof, if you will, soil mix recipe, I would go ahead and recommend my succulent soil mix, because that's going to be a mix that is just a little bit more well draining than perhaps an aroid soil mix recipe, or something that you're just gonna find in a bag mix at the grocery store or at your big box store or plant nursery. Now, if this is a plant that you don't want to invest sort of all of those ingredients to craft something special for it, let's face it, these are generally pretty affordable plants, then I would go ahead and recommend taking whatever soil mix recipe you are growing your plant in and adding a little bit of something that is gritty and improves the well-draining nature of that soil. So something like orchid bark or perlite or vermiculite or even a gritty gravel, just anything really that's going to allow that water to flow through and drain out. And always, no matter what, make sure your plant isn't sitting in a saucer of water for an extended period of time, because even if that water flows through something that is really excellent and well draining, like my succulent soil mix recipe, and then it sits in that saucer of water after you've watered it, it's just going to soak right back up, and that water isn't going to be able to fully leave the plant pot, and those roots are going to be, again, prone to that condition of root rot, even if it's sitting in a really great, excellent, well-draining soil mix recipe. So, something to consider. Temperature and humidity. What kind of temperature and humidity environment can you create in your home or office to give these plants the best shot at success? Well, the good news is you probably don't really have to do a whole lot. When you're growing these inside your home, you really just don't have to worry about that humidity or temperature swings. They're just not sensitive to either. So think 65 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit as being sort of the Goldilocks range for not just people, but also most plants, including these plants. That also means that they're a really adaptable plant to be grown outside during the summer season, where maybe that temperature gets a little hotter than 80, gets up to the 90s for a short period of time, or maybe in the fall or in the spring it drops down a little bit below 65 degrees. These plants are going to be fine. Just make sure that you don't expose them to freezing conditions. They are tropical, and that will certainly not be good for these plants. And of course, if you are having them outside and they're getting that exposure to something like 90 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures or plus, you want to make sure, definitely, especially in those conditions, that they are in a shaded environment, because they're more likely to burn than they are to wilt from heat exposure. So if they are outside, you probably have to worry less about the temperature than you do the lighting conditions and burning or frying the leaves on these plants. Same thing with humidity. I just really, if you have an overly dry home during the winter and you find other tropical houseplants difficult to care for, they're just too needy when it comes to humidity levels, this is probably a plant you don't have to worry about that in. Now, if you live in a desert-like environment, you probably might have some humidity type issues if you're growing these outside, even in a shaded or covered environment. But if you're growing them inside your home, you're probably gonna have enough humidity, even in a desert-like environment. If you're comfortable, they're probably gonna be comfortable. Fertilizing your Dracaenas. When it comes to fertilizing your Dracaena plants, I'm happy to report these are a very low maintenance plant, right? They just don't typically require a whole lot of fertilizer. In fact, you're probably more likely to do more harm than good by over-fertilizing your plant. So actually, if you're going to fertilize, I'd use a well-balanced, dilute amount of fertilizer, maybe once, maybe twice a year maximum. So think in the spring, if your plant is actively sending out new growth, that's a really good time to fertilize. Typically, as a rule of thumb, I don't like to fertilize my plants if they're not actively growing or sending out new roots and shoots. But with this plant especially, that's something that I'm careful to take into consideration. They just are really a little bit sensitive to over-fertilization, so less is more in this circumstance. Pet safety. Are Dracaenas pet safe? Well, unfortunately, no. This is one of the things that is, there has to be something about these plants that is a little fussy and delicate, right? If you've got plants, or if you've got pets around rather, and you're worried about them eating or chewing on your plants, this is maybe not a plant that you want to bring home and add to your collection. Other than that, other than the pet safety component, other than maybe taking care not to over-fertilize or over-water your plant, basically, this is a plant you can forget about most of the time. This is one that you can mindfully not have to worry about, and just, it'll probably do just fine and survive and thrive in your home or your office environment. So let's just go through a very quick rundown of my top tips in caring for your Dracaena plants. Lighting. When it comes to lighting for your Dracaena plants, these plants would certainly love medium to bright light, but they will do shockingly well in low light conditions. Watering. When it comes to watering your Dracaena plants, they're actually very drought tolerant, so you probably don't have to worry about underwatering them. Rather, you probably have to worry about overwatering them. Soil. When it comes to soil, a chunky, well-draining soil mix, like my succulent soil mix recipe, is probably going to be the best choice. It'll help keep you from overwatering your plants and make sure that they don't end up with root rot. Temperature and humidity. These plants are low fuss. You don't really have to worry about either of these. Keep them above freezing, generally between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And humidity, if you're comfortable, they're probably comfortable. Fertilizing your Dracaenas. When it comes to fertilizing them, maybe think a well-balanced, well-diluted fertilizer once, maybe twice a year when the plant's actively growing. If you don't have fertilizer, you probably don't have to worry about it unless it's giving you signs of stress. Pet safety. Unfortunately, Dracaenas are not considered pet safe, so keep them out of little mouths and little tummies. And that's it. Those are my top tips in caring for Dracaena. I hope now you have a sense of why I actually love these plants. I mean, you may have seen them around. I'm a sucker for a plant that can survive and thrive with a little bit of mindful neglect. And if that's also your vibe when it comes to plants, these are definitely a good plant to consider. I hope you'll check them out. Thanks for watching. Take care.